love that intro. Thank you so much, Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And awesome. Where we're picking up today is on page 81. And because Howard is a responsible adult, he put in it's the first paragraph, but wait, you wouldn't know it because it's like halfway down the page. So page 81, paragraph 1. And I'm going to have a pause. A little bit of a pregnant pause, but I won't take a full 9 months to get to my point. That's just so you guys can have a moment to find it. All right, 81, paragraph 1. And it kicks off, whatever the situation. So what is the situation that we're talking about, especially if we weren't here last week? Where we are is we're right smack dab in the middle of the 9th step amends process. And what we're talking about, the situation in particular, is how do we make amends for infidelity? We are in a relationship and we have cheated, we have stepped out, we have been unfaithful. How do we make that right? And last week, we were kind of really discussing that push and pull that people will have and that meeting people where they're at. And so where we're picking up is like, okay, whatever the situation is, we got to do something. So it says, whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. Because I don't know about you, and this has nothing to do in particular with infidelity. It's to do with any 9th step amends that I've ever had to make in my life. What do I want to do about it? Nothing. I don't want to make that amends. I want to avoid it as much as I can. I don't want to. No, thank you. And especially like the difficult ones. I don't want to do anything. But what we are called is to do something about it. We have to take action, which is not cool because I mean, like, this whole chapter is called Into Action, and it's really expecting a lot of work from us here in this part of the book. Not cool. All right. We usually have to do something about it. If we are sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? Not always, we think. And so that's sort of the first direction. If we have been unfaithful and our spouse doesn't know, should we lay it bare? And should we say, this is what we've done? And the direction is, the direction kind of feels a little directionless. It says, not always, we think. So bear with me. Let's break down and let's talk about this direction. And I know this is a part of the book where, and I'll be honest, I read this and I'm like, Bill, listen, you're like rigorously honest. And we get to infidelity. It's like, well, maybe. I was like, Bill, come on, guy, get on it. Like, let's get rigorously honest. But one of the things that I was not fully taking into consideration is the nature of the harm that can be caused with infidelity. When we talk about infidelity, it is simply more than a little bit of dishonesty. It is a betrayal of trust, and it shatters the foundation of the relationship. So when it is holding us to that standard of let's take a moment and think about this and consider it, and we're going to probably next week, definitely next week, because I'm only supposed to do 2 at a time. At most, although last time I got 3. I got away with 3. Oh, it was great. Just breaking rules, taking names. I only did 1 last week. I can't count. That's who invited me. And I always want to point out this is Kathy. Kathy invited me. And Howard said it was okay. So we can take them all through the columns. Alrighty. But not always, we think. Keep in mind, we're talking about infidelity, and infidelity shatters trust. And genuinely, if you've ever been on the receiving end of infidelity, you know that like it is traumatic. It is traumatic. And one of the most painful things that I've experienced, well, no, this is not I've experienced a lot of painful things, but sorry, don't just casually trauma dump in the middle of the big book study page. Focus. But some of the painful things that I've experienced is finding out about that infidelity. And I'll share with you one of the things that is so awful about it is because I don't know about you, but I had this moral and I had this standard that if somebody cheats on me, I'm done. I'm not putting up with that. I'm not putting up with that disrespect. Well, if somebody then comes to me and told me that they cheated on me, I'm thrust into a decision. And it is a decision that I don't want to make. And I don't know about you. I don't like change. I don't like having to walk away. I don't like having to shut the door. But I know in my heart I ought not stay. And that is a terrible place to be. And if you have been there, if you have, experienced that, you know exactly what we're talking about. So I think Bill is sort of hedging it with, hey, let's consider the other person. Now, we're going to see that next week when it talks about the final direction that we're not talking about here, but I can't stay on one paragraph. There's going to be bouncing. She's going to be bouncing around. I try, but I can't. But the most important direction, the thrust of what we're trying to do is to consider what would be best for the other person. What would be best for the other person? Now, I just feel called to talk about this. Probably I'm on a tangent, and I'm sure we'd love to get through this paragraph, but we'll get through it when we get through it. Oftentimes you'll hear rumors about Bill Wilson, and you'll be like, man, he is a rampant womanizer. He was out there doing things to newcomers, and he was just a terrible guy, rampant womanizer. Well, there's a historian, and we do have some of the history husbands here today. So if anything that I say is incorrect, I don't stand much, but I do stand to be corrected. So y'all let me know if I'm wrong. And so he heard about this, and he heard these reports that Bill Wilson would go to somewhere like St. Louis, and they'd have to have a squad of people to get him to stay away from newcomers. And he was like, whoa, that is really messed up. And so he began to investigate that. And he was looking into these reports. And he followed the trail of the reports. And every single report of Bill Wilson's rampant womanizing led back to a gentleman, I believe of the name Tom P. I believe it was Tom Powers. And they had, nailed it! Nailed the history. Didn't even add my little spice on there. The only place I can have spice because I have a delicate constitution. There's one disgruntled alcoholic who was talking a lot of gossip about this guy. They had a falling out in the 40s or 50s. And so we might read this and be like, ugh, what a womanizer. And that's not fully true. But also, it's also important to remember when we hear gossip about other people, how quickly it can spread and how damaging it can be. So, I don't know, just felt like talking about Tom P for no reason. Off we go. Not always we think. If she knows in a general way that we have been wild, should we tell her in detail? It says, undoubtedly, we should admit our fault. So the second question is if my partner or the person I'm in a relationship knows that I've been wild, and perhaps not the most utmost with my conduct, should I tell her the details? And then it says, not always. Pointing to that, not always. We should admit our fault. So I'll tell you what that practically looks like. I have sponsored people who have been in relationships with people and who have been cheated on, and some where they have been unfaithful. The details can be incredibly damaging. Talking about who you were with, what that was like, the things that you did, that can just be incredibly, incredibly harmful. Even if there was not infidelity, there's that thing about oversharing about your past sexual escapades with a current partner. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. I'm not the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. But what I will say is they don't need that visual in their mind to torment them with jealousy and insecurity. So that's kind of what we're talking about there. And so what does that look like? If we feel called to we're always called to make an amends. And let's say our spouse does not know that we have been unfaithful. And let's say we've taken it to God. Let's say we've taken it to our sponsor. Maybe we've taken it to some trusted AA members and we've received guidance. And let's say the guidance we received is that would be more harmful to be explicit in what we did. How I have found it helpful to address that in the amends process is to say, I was not the husband, spouse, partner that you needed me to be, and I fell short. So that is a way to bring it up without specifically saying, and I had an affair. If that's where we feel called. Now, when it talks about we've been wild in a general way, we can then look at that idea of making the amends in saying, I have not always treated you with the respect that, as you know, I have not always treated you with the respect that you needed. I have not always been respectful of you in my behavior and in my actions. So we're addressing it, but we're not going into specifics. And I think that's where he's leading, and that's where he's guiding. Now, Paul, if you're eating that pizza, you chew carefully. Don't choke on camera. Thank you. I'm not codependent. It's weird that you guys think I'm codependent. So, undoubtedly, we should admit our faults. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She will want to know who the woman is and where she is. Because, listen, we know if you've ever been cheated on, we know. We want the info. Give me the deets. Give me the address. Give me the name. I'm going. I got my baseball bat. Off I go. Or no, not you guys? Cool. Yeah. No, me too. Me neither. That's not how I have ever addressed conflict. It's fine. But we feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. So what it is important to do, if there is enough information where, we got to say, listen, I need to tell you. You won't say in an amends, hey, listen, but in an amends to say, as you may know, I have been unfaithful to you. And that was incredibly dishonest. That was incredibly selfish. And it was a betrayal of the trust that you had in me. And it is not fair to but it is not fair to throw that other person under the bus, because we were the one. I love that Howard and Kathy are flirting with emojis as I'm like, here's how we make a very serious, I'm here for it, by the way. I'm absolutely here for it. I'm like 100%. Also, it's weird that you guys think I have some ADHD and I have a problem with my attention. Why would you guys think that? By the way, that is what we call gaslighting, and I shouldn't be doing that. I know, we all know, I'm all over the place. Focus, Paige. So, what we need to do is I know, squirrel, it is bad, y'all. Literally, I remember I was sitting with a sponsee one time and we were outside, beautiful weather, and he's like, Paige, do you have ADHD? And I was literally staring at a squirrel that was hopping around, and I'm like, no, I don't. I didn't know. I know. Solitary self-appraisal is insufficient, y'all. I didn't know. Focusing. We don't have the right to save our own skin at another person's expense. I don't have the right to save my own butt at the expense of another human being. When I make an amends, I need to take accountability, but not cause the harm where I'm throwing somebody under the bus, where, again, that venting of jealousy. And bear with me, mid-paragraph, we're going on a little bounce. Let's bounce to page 74. 74. It's not that far. Thank you, Rob. You're on it. Yes, Kathy knows. If anyone's wondering, where can you find God? God is under the bus. So when your sponsor is throwing you under the bus in service, or wanting you to make an amends you don't want to make, or wanting you to sponsor somebody and you're like, I don't want to, that's where God is found. God is found under the bus. Alrighty, page 74. And what we're looking at is if we cannot or would not do this, that first full paragraph halfway down the page. And we're talking in this page 74 in regards to the fifth step. Who do we take a fifth step to? But some of these principles apply. And we're going to skip down a couple lines. And actually, it says, it may be one of our own family, but we cannot disclose anything to our wives or parents which will hurt them and make them unhappy. Yikes! Do not be doing your fifth step with mom. Please do not take your sex inventory to your current spouse. Don't do it. Don't do it. You got a sponsor? Do that. And I'm only pointing to that part of the line because I think it's funny. The line that I actually want to take us to is we have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. So I don't have the right to get free of the guilt and the shame that I feel and to throw the other person who I had an affair with under the bus. Thank you. And that is way more time than I deserve. He gives me extra. I hear he gives everyone extra. Just the gossip, the hot gossip, as I'm like, careful with the gossip. Everyone, did you hear Howard gives people extra time? Ooh. Sorry. Oh man, it's a weird one today, but when is it not? And by the way, I have a study I got to do after this. Sucks to be the people to come to that one. It's only getting weirder. And you might think I'm trying to plug it. I'm not. It's a warning. All right. I don't have the right to get free of the guilt and the shame that I feel for my behavior and throw the person that I had the affair with under the bus. Because I was the one that was in the relationship. I was the one that made the commitment, and I was the one that broke the commitment. And that person might not have even known I was in a relationship. I need to bear the full brunt of the responsibility. It goes on to say, such parts of our story we will tell to someone who will understand yet be unaffected. Again, the thrust of that is in the fifth step. But what we're talking about is that idea that I need to not throw anyone unfairly under the bus. Sponsees, they got to go under the bus. That's where they go. And it says, the rule is. Isn't that weird? I thought there was no rules. I thought there was no rules in this whole AA thing. Well, we found one. Rude. Sneaking a little rule in there. The rule is we must. What? A rule and a must? In the same sentence? Oh, it's a little musty in here, y'all. Somebody get a fan going. Get the dehumidifier out. It's a little musty. I don't know if a dehumidifier would help with must. I actually don't know how that works. No, I don't. Febreze. I'm just going to Febreze it. That's fine. It's fine. You just pretend it's not there. But the rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. Now, when we talk about that being hard on ourselves, we're not talking about beating ourselves up. We're not talking about living in guilt and shame, but we are talking about holding ourselves to the utmost standard. I am going to take responsibility for myself. I am going to take full responsibility for my actions, and I'm not going to blame or throw anyone else who does not deserve to be under the bus, under that bus. So I need to take responsibility. And that, even though that is a fifth step direction, the theme therein ties with what we were reading on page 81. And actually, I have a story. I wish it was mine, but it was a sponsee that I was working with. And this is, even though this is a story about cheese. So it's a very serious story about cheese. So it's not really about infidelity. And I actually normally talk about it in a different part of the book, but we're talking about it here. So I have this sponsee, and she was living in a sober living house when I was working with her. And what would happen is they would get food bank donations, and her roommate would go and receive the food bank donations, and they would take out all the good stuff, which is to say they would steal the cheese and hide the cheese and be like, everyone, this is the food we got. They have a little cheese stash hidden away somewhere. And when I was working with this sponsee, I'm like, we were looking at amends, and it was like, that was the perfect amends to start with. Because it wasn't going to, spoilers, it wasn't going to go bad. The friendships were not going to end over a block of cheese. The police were not going to be called. There was not going to be a SWAT team kicking in the doors. You know, she was not going to be getting marched all the way to Alcatraz prison. Like, it was going to be fine. But there was an important principle at play. So what she did was she went to all of her roommates and made amends. But she was very careful to make amends and not name her cheese accomplice, to throw her cheese culprit with her under the bus, and did not mention what her cheese buddy had done. And that is the principle, and that's what we're talking about. So it says, so going back to page 81, it says, we feel we ought to say to her that we have no right to involve another person. We take responsibility for our cheese harms. It's the other person. It's nacho cheese. It's our cheese. That is so stupid. That is so stupid. And you think it'd be Havarti for me to make a cheese pun in the middle of the thing? Man. Again, I want you to know this is a Kathy problem, and Howard signed off on it. So that's all complaints can be addressed to them, and they will take them in the form of 4-column written inventory. That's how they'll take complaints here. Alrighty. So it says, we are sorry for what we have done, and God willing it shall not be repeated. More than that we cannot do. We have no right to go further, no right to cause harm to that other person. And it then goes to say, though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort. Oh, good. Last time we had a rule. Now there's no rule. Woo! I don't got no rule. Woo! We have often found this the best course to take. So this sort of direction is what they have found to be prudent. But if you have it on your heart, if God is putting something on your heart, God is the ultimate authority. And we follow the directions that are laid out before us in the book. We follow what God puts on our heart, and we follow the advice, the suggestions, the directions, and the experience of those who came before us. So that sort of encapsulates that. It goes on to say, our design for living is not a one-way street. And I want to point out, design for living. These 12 steps are not a set it and forget it deal. It is not. All right, I did a set of steps. Woo! All done. Great. Recovered. And nothing more to do. Woo! No, these 12 steps are how we live our lives today. They are not the things that we talk about in the rooms. They are how we live our lives outside of the rooms. In fact, 4 through 9, steps 4 through 9 is the vehicle. It is the motor. It is the engine of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is what takes me from that place of hopelessness in step 1 to the hope that is in step 12. To the 10th step promises, where we are free. The obsession to drink is gone. But if I don't keep that engine running, if I don't keep that motor going, I'm going to be in trouble. I've got to continue to grow and to seek and to do this work, 4 through 9, on a daily basis. And so our design for living, that's what this thing is. It is a way of life. It says it is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as for the husband. And bear with me, I'm about to read a challenging line. And I'm going to talk about it, but then I'm going to recontextualize it. You know Howard knows what's coming. He's like, yikes. It says, if we can forget, so can she. Yikes. I know. Bear with me. It's like, if we can forget about the terrible thing we did, she'll forget about the terrible thing we did to her. But again, I will contextualize this. Not everyone is remorseful who has an affair. Not everyone who feels bad who has an affair. But I remember working with a sponsee, I shared about her last week, where her husband knew, and her husband had forgiven her. And she was so racked with guilt that she was physically ill. She would be often dry heaving when we were meeting together, and she was so overwhelmed and so anxious and couldn't get free. And so when I think of that line, I think of her. And I'm gonna wrap up this paragraph, and then we're gonna do some stuff. Bear with me with this. It says, it is better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy, because of course it is easier to take it out on somebody that I don't know and to make them the villain than it is that partner that I don't want to let go of course. But if I just bridge that gap of, man, that's a tough line for sure. But what is the thrust of what we're trying to say there? What we're trying to say is that these 12 steps as a way of life are actions that work in anyone's life. And so the suggestion there is that if we have a loved one that is struggling with not even this illness, but we have a loved one that is struggling. And maybe we have a loved one that is struggling with our illness and the manifestations of our illness. One of the best things that could possibly be done is for them to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like their life depends on it. And bear with me, I'm going on a little bouncy bounce. Let's pop over to page 97. I'm throwing this out there. And I'm like, oh, I'm going on some tangents. Yikes. Thanks, Rob. That's lovely of you. So it says, though an alcoholic does not respond. We're at the very bottom full paragraph. I'm not like Howard. I can't count paragraphs. That's hard. And I used to be a math tutor, which should scare everyone. 97 bottom full paragraph. Though an alcoholic does not respond, there is no reason why you should neglect his family. You should continue to be friendly to them. The family should be offered your way of life. What is the way of life? These 12 steps as directed out of this book. So we should offer the non-alcoholics these 12 steps as a way of life. And it says, should they accept? So should they accept that offer and practice spiritual principles? The spiritual principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, in my opinion, and if you disagree with me, you are right and I'm wrong. I mean, we have the circus tent. Obviously, I'm wrong. But what I will say is that for me, the spiritual principles of Alcoholics Anonymous are not these nebulous concepts. Instead, they are the practical, tangible actions of the 12 steps. And those are things that I can practice in my daily life. So should they accept this way of life? And should we practice spiritual principles? Actively working these 12 steps as a way of life, there is a much better chance that the head of the family will recover. And even though he continues to drink, the family will find life more bearable. And that these 12 steps, they work. They work. Bear with me. Let's pop over to page 112. Page 112. It's where what we're talking about, page 112, and I'm gonna go quickly with this because I'd actually like to spend more time on 116 bouncing around. It is the second full paragraph. If this kind of approach does not catch your husband's interest, we're talking about these principles of success. For me, the 6 principles of success. It may be best to drop the subject, but after a friendly talk, your husband will usually revive the topic himself. This may take patient waiting, but it will be worth it. Meanwhile, so this is for the spouse of the non-alcoholic, and they're like, you know, that their partner doesn't want to get sober. And it's like, okay, we're just going to give them the dignity of their experience. Meanwhile, the non-alcoholic, you might try to help the wife of another serious drinker. And how would I help somebody? The most tangible way, the deepest, most powerful help that I have to offer is these 12 steps as a way of life. That's what we have to offer. And I'm going quickly. Howard gave me extra time and I'm not using it very well. So let's pop over to page 116 and let's have a look at the second full paragraph. 116 second full paragraph. I'm just motoring. You'll catch up. Thanks, guys. We have elsewhere remarked how much better life is when lived on a spiritual plane. That is these 12 steps as a way of life. That is the 4th dimension. That is living with an awakened spirit. If God can solve the age-old riddle of alcoholism, he can solve your problems too. Problems. Not just the obsession of the mind, but the spirit, the malady of the spirit. And we'll see those problems pointed out a number of places. We'll see them on page 13. We'll see them on page 42. This is a way. Did you give me extra time? This is a way. Oh, I caught that. Oh, we might actually have time to go to 13 and 42. Hold on. So it says, we wives. Hold on. The problems. This is a way of life which answers all our problems. This works on all areas of our life. There is not a problem that I cannot bring to the 12 steps. There is not a problem that I cannot bring to that power which is God. So it makes sense if I feel hurt and betrayed that this power is bigger than that. And by the way, if I need to leave, man, I can't leave on my own power. I need God's power to kick that bum to the curb. And that's experiential, y'all. That is experiential. I couldn't let go of that dumpster fire. I was half of the dumpster fire. He's not all of the dumpster fire. But I couldn't let go of that until I had begun to awaken to God's presence. We wise found that, like everybody else, these are the human condition. We were afflicted, which means we're suffering from pride, self-pity, vanity, and all the things which go to make up the self-centered person. And we were not above selfishness or dishonesty. As our husbands began to apply spiritual principles, which it's the tangible actions in their lives, we began to see the desirability of doing so too. We're going to motor. Let's pop over to page 13 and page 42. So we'll go to page 13 first because that's the order. So very, very, very bottom paragraph, page 13. It's Abby Thatcher promising Bill Wilson. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator. That relationship is the spiritual awakening. And then it says that I would have the elements of a way of living. Way of living? Man, we want this thing. Way of life. I got to keep doing it. Not cool, man. Not cool. The way of living, which answered all my problems. All my problems. And again, let's pop over to page 42. And it's very, very, very bottom two lines of page 42. It says, quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles, these 12 steps are the principles, would solve all my problems. And there's many more places where we got the word problems, not just problem. And so the takeaway from this is, regardless of what I'm struggling from, regardless of the hurt that I'm feeling, whether it is imagined, because I have lots of imagined problems, I make them up, or real, like a partner or a loved one breaking my heart and betraying my trust, we have a way of life that works. We have an answer that will help us walk through the fire, walk through the forest, walk through the pain, and get through the other side. And if you have not experienced that yet, please let us help you. Thank you for the opportunity to share. And for the extra time, I appreciate it.